9:30, so promise you we'd start at 9:30, we will. My name is Mike Sullivan. I'm the director of OCPF. We have several of our staff with us today. Some people whose names you might recognize that you may have talked to. They're here to represent us in their different capacities, and they all have very important roles within the office. First is Jason Tate. He's our Director of Communications and Education. He does all of our seminars. If you ever come in on Wednesday at 2 o'clock to do a seminar, which we hold every Wednesday, Jason is generally the person you see. We have two folks from our IT department, software that we use, that we're putting together, that you have all used to electronically file your reports, Sam Choi and Al Grimes. Our general counsel is Greg Byrne. He's the one who wrote the statute. You knew you'd like that, didn't you? I might have been the one with the idea. He's the one who wrote it. And Mike Joyce and Caroline Paris, who do the actual work in the office. They're the auditors that deal with the political action committees. Mike is the one with the beard. Caroline is the one without. Just helping you out a little bit. At the outset, let me ask one question. How many of you have amended a report? How many of you find that to be very, very annoying and difficult? How about the annoying part? Okay. Would it make you happy if I told you that the amount of amendments you are going to have to do are going to go down dramatically? Yeah. How many don't care? Okay. All right. That's the whole purpose of what we did with this statute. And I'll get into some of the stuff that's on the PowerPoint in a minute. But the whole purpose of what we did here is to make this, believe it or not, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, is to make your life easier and to make the candidate's life easier. We're tired of sending letters to candidates that say, such and such PAC said they gave you money. And then the candidate says, well, I didn't cash the check. And then we go back to the PAC and we say, did that check get cashed? Because you didn't send us copies of your checks. And you say, oh, no, it didn't get cashed. And we say, you need to amend your report. That's one long process that we'd like to just avoid. And we think that going into the depository system, which we'll explain in detail as we sit here today, will make your life a lot easier. Okay? Having said that, we do a little bit of background about the agency to start. Most of you know that OCPF is a nonpartisan agency. We have a budget of about $1.4 million. We have 17 people within the office. There are extra chairs if you want to grab them there if there aren't any folders. Are there folders? That's a great question. Jace, do we have enough folders for these people?
There are a few more over here.
Okay, and if we don't, can we get some copied maybe? Run upstairs and copy some more? Well, those of you who didn't RSVP, we won't penalize you. Okay, but we will make more copies of the folders and get them down.
Spell on here.
People are dying to give them away, look. Okay. So we are a nonpartisan agency established in 1973, a budget of $1.4 million, 17 people. I am appointed by a bipartisan commission. So, as my friends often ask me, did it matter to you who won the gubernatorial race? No. I'm appointed by Democrats and Republicans, so it doesn't matter to me who the governor is. There's the commission that appoints me simply does that. They appoint the director, they set a salary, and they go away for 6 years. So I don't have to meet with them once a month or anything like that. And who are they? The dean of a law school, who's appointed by the governor, the Secretary of State, who acts as the chairman, the director of the chairman of the Republican Party, and the chairman of the Democratic Party. Those four people have to have a unanimous vote to pick the director. I was appointed in 1994, which seems like eons ago. And the only thing I can tell you then is I wasn't as gray as I am now. At one point, I actually was blonde in my life. We have 4 departments pretty much in the office. Audit, who you deal with on a regular basis. Legal, who you hope never to have to deal with. Our IT folks, who you deal with intermittently sometimes, especially Tracy Dano, who's not here today, but who handles a lot of the walking you through the process, and obviously an administrative department. So that's sort of the structure. Now the changes in the law. The governor signed a bill on August 1st. What was the bill really about? The whole impetus for changing the law, believe it or not, Had nothing to do with you. It had to do with super PACs. If you remember the Boston mayoral election last November, a lot of money came in at the end and no one knew where it came from. There was a lot of independent spending, okay? There was a hue and cry for, hey, we need to know where this money came from. So we came up with a legislative solution for disclosure for super PACs. While we were doing that, we also took a look at the statute and said, what else can we make to make things better, make disclosure better, make it a little easier for people? And hopefully that's what we've come up with today. So we made a whole bunch of changes to what's called the depository reporting system. Hey guys, how are you? No problem. Come on in. You can do the seminar if you'd like.
No,
Sure. There are two systems. One is the non-depository system, and the other is the depository system. So what's non-depository? Up until now, was all legislative candidates, all PACs, all people's committees, most local candidates. Okay, they were all in the non-depository. What is non-depository? You do your own reporting. Okay, you keep your own records, you do all of your own reporting. You have a bank account, obviously, but all the information that comes into OCPF is filed by you. What's the depository system? Some of what comes into OCPF is filed by you, and much of what comes into OCPF is filed by the bank. We take the two reports that come in, the ones from you and the ones from the bank, and merge them. And we're going to walk you through that whole process, and you're going to see it's going to be kind of a pain to get into the system. When you go to the banks, for example, they might not know what you're talking about, so there's going to need to be some communication with the bank, with us, okay? Once we get you in, and believe me, we've got a lot of experience with this because we've got statewide candidates and a lot of city candidates, county candidates that are all in the system. Once we get you into the system, your life's going to get a lot better with reporting. Okay? It's going to be a little more frequent in what you do, but in smaller chunks. And it's going to make sure that, here's the key. How many of you have balance discrepancies? It's okay, you can admit it. Okay? All right? Those of you who have balance discrepancies, they're going to go away. Because the bank's going to give us the amount that you really have in the bank. Okay? So, the details of how this depository system works. Okay? You're going to go to the bank just like you always did, make a deposit. Or if it's wired in, it's wired in. That's fine. Okay? What you do in the depository system is you tell us who gave you the money. That's your role. That's your filing responsibility. So if you have people that are over $50 in a calendar year, you provide us with their name and their address. If they're $200 or more, need occupation and employer. Many of you have your union members who are giving you money and staying hopefully below the $50 threshold. And you don't have to itemize, but you have to say contributions under 50 and file a deposit report. We'll get into what a deposit report is and when it needs to be filed, okay? You do file it shortly after the deposit is made. So it's not like you wait until September and file the first report, October for the second, and January for the last one. You're doing these as you go along, okay? On the other side, come go back, please. On the expenditure side,
excuse me, can I ask you a question?
yeah.
How many days do we have to file that?
I'm going to get into all of that, I promise, okay? And if I don't, you just yell at me and ask me to do the question again, okay? But I won't forget that, okay? On the expenditure side, you write a check, okay? In the past, you've had to take that check and put it into our system. All the information, the date, the vendor, the purpose, the amount, all that good stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. That's all going to go away in most cases, okay? And we'll walk you through everything. That's the part that makes life a lot easier, okay? The expenditure side of the deal is handled by the bank. How often does the bank file with us? Under the new rules, twice a month, okay? Twice a month, the bank files with us 24 times a year. Same as they do for statewide candidates, for county candidates, governor's council, and anybody who runs for mayor or city council in a city over 75,000 people. Which means we picked up 8 new cities this year. We used to have them over 100,000. Okay? Okay. How are you going to finish 2014? Just the way you started it. You're going to file a year-end report with us, okay? And it's going to be just like you always did. What we're asking you to do is to have minimal activity in December and January. In other words, get your checks cleared, the expenditure checks that you're writing. Get them cleared so that it's a clean slate when we start the new process. Okay? Get the money in that's coming in, get it into the bank. Don't try to do very little around the end of December especially, and the beginning of January. You're going to file a regular campaign finance report, year-end report that's going to go from October through December 31st, just like you always did. Okay, when you file that report, you're going to give us a number. You're going to tell us that's your ending balance. You're going to compare it to your bank statement, and in many cases, it's going to be off a little bit. Why is it going to be off? How does that happen? Any idea? You forget to put in a deposit. Okay, we see that happen a lot. Someone wrote you a check, you put it in, you account for it, and it bounces. Did you put it in as an expenditure on the other side? Probably not. Okay, that happens all the time. So you've got a $500 check to someone, to a PAC or a candidate, in the candidate case, and then they're charged $500 plus a $25 fee. Well, that's never been put in because people don't think of that as an expenditure, and therefore your balance is off. On the other hand, you wrote a check. You sponsored somebody, you made a donation, and they never cashed the check. Just grab a chair, man. That's the best I can tell you at this point. And we're making some more. Are we making more copies? Yeah. We're making more copies of the handout.
Thank
you. Okay. So, on the other hand, expenditures that weren't cash that you reported, that screws up your balance. So the conversation that we need to have at the end of the year, if you're $200 off, $600 off, even $1,000 off, and you've been in business 20 years, I'm not too upset about that. No one's running to Disney on $1,000 over 20 years on a little vacation for the family. We can do a one-time accounting adjustment, and we're willing to do that in the cases that need it. If you're off 20 grand, that's a different conversation. Fair enough? Okay? That's the conversation when we say, maybe we should take a look at your bank statements and find out just what the hell happened. All right, and we've done that on a number of occasions, both with candidates and with PACs. And most of the time, and there are people in this room who will agree with this, most of the time, we're able to figure it out. Okay? And we're able to move forward, and that's the whole idea here. If you wouldn't be here, generally speaking, if you were stealing the money. I get that. Okay? People who run for office, people who run political action committees, they're just like regular people in the public. And my feeling on that is 95% of the people in the world want to do it right and can. 2 or 3% of the people in the world want to do it right and just aren't smart enough to figure it out. And 2 or 3% want to screw around. All right? So my job is to help 98% and catch 2 or 3%. Okay? So that's pretty much how we work. How do you get started? In your packet, you should have a list of banks. It's like an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. Please tell me it's there.
Yes.
Okay, everybody has it? See if your bank's there. If your bank is there, that means they're in the system that reports, the depository system with us. They're up and they're running. Okay? That's the one, yeah. If your bank is there, that's good. If your bank is not there and you want to keep that bank, have a conversation with them. Go in and talk to them and say, look, we've got a new law. The law says that my bank has to report to OCPF. Do you want to be involved in this system? They're not going to know what you're talking about. The 3 of you, the 2 of you, should call us. Okay? And the bank can have a conversation with us. And then it'll go up to the next level in the bank, and they'll probably want to have a conversation with us. If at the end of the day they want to get into the depository system because they don't want to lose your business, or for whatever strategic reason they decide, great. We'll set them up and we'll be able to work with them. If they don't want to get into the system, if you're using a relatively obscure bank, and they don't want to, maybe that's the wrong term, obscure bank, but a smaller bank that doesn't want to do this, that's fine. But you're going to have to go change to a different bank. Now, we've had some banks recently that do some work in the PAC area, especially with unions, that have come to us and said, we want to be in. So they might not be on this list, but they might be aware of what it is that we're going to do. Okay? So you're going to file what's called a D-103. That form should also be in your packet. I hate forms. I hate the fact that we call it the D-103 form, but it makes it, it's a fact of life that we have to deal with it. What does it do? The treasurer signs it, and the bank signs it. That's the bank agreeing, okay, to be in this system. That form is filed with us, You can fax it to us, email it to us, that's all fine, as long as we get it. And we will reset you up into the depository system, okay? But you have to do that form. Can you do it now? Yes. You want to go talk to the banks now? That's okay. What am I doing? Oh, we've got packets that I've just made, so I will, rather than doing that, how many need them? One? Okay, well, good. Everybody else shows up late, we'll just leave them here and they'll bother you. Okay. So the bank agrees by signing the D-103. You get the D-103 to us. We will communicate with the bank about when to start filing. Okay? But that's an important first step. Okay? So again, if your bank doesn't want to do it, you got to get out of the system. And if they're unfamiliar, you can give them the memo that you've got in your packet as well. Or again, they can call us. Rule number 1 today, by the way, is when you have a question, call us. Okay? We'll be glad to walk you through it. Many of you call and talk to Caroline and Mike on a regular basis. That's our goal, is to be able to get you through the process and get you up and running. Okay? So that's the first goal today, is to make sure that you call us. The second goal, by the way, and probably the more important one to me, is let's not be in a newspaper story together. Okay? If we're in a newspaper story together, that usually means something bad has happened, and I'd like to avoid that as much as possible. Second step, after you've filed your year-end report, the one that's due January 20th, we'd like you to file that early, by the way, if you could. We'd love you to file it by the 10th. Okay? Remember how I told you I'd like you to keep your activity minimal in December and January? You're going to file an initial report with us that's going to cover the month of January. That's the transition month. Okay? So that's why we want you to keep your activity as minimal as possible in January. You're going to it's called a D-102 form. I don't think we even use the term up here. But it's an initial report that's filed electronically with us. It's similar to what you filed for a year-end report. Okay, that's just to get you over, and we'll have all the banks set up. It's the 1 month where we're transitioning people over and trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Okay? That report's going to cover 1 month, January 1 to January 31. We'll give you a due date. I don't know, it'll be like the 10th of February or something. Most of you, how many of you have a lot of activity in January? Okay, very few. Okay? So that's good. We'd like you to minimize it as much as possible and file that report. Okay? Okay. After we're up and running, we get into February, and you go to the bank, and you make a deposit. Or you get notice of a deposit because you've had money wired into the account. What do you need to do? And this is where it changes for you. You need to file a deposit report with us using our software. Now we're going to have a new report. We're going to have a new system out. We have Web Reporter and Reporter 5. We're combining the two. Right, Al?
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to work. Right, Al? Look at the IT guy. Didn't want to smile, but it will work. Okay? When do we want you to file it? That was your question, right? Somebody back there? Wasn't that the question about when to file the report? Okay. We recommend that you file it within 3 days of deposit. Key word, recommend. Why? Because we want you to do it pretty much contiguous with when the money goes in the bank. That way it doesn't get screwed up. You make a deposit for $7,400, and 3 days later you're filing a report for $7,400, we're all good. You're not going to get a letter from us that says it doesn't match. Okay? If you wait till the end of the month, well, the end of the reporting period, there's more of an opportunity for things to screw up. When does it legally have to be done? Remember we said that they report 24 times a year, twice a month? So the reporting period goes from the 1st of the month to the 15th. And the bank reports by the 20th. That's when your deposit report has to be filed for the first half of the month, by the 20th. Then from the 16th till the end, and the bank report is due the 5th. That's when you have to report by the 5th. So we'd like you to get into the habit of within 3 days, but legally, it's on the 20th for the first half of the month, and the 5th for the second half of the month. Okay? Everything that you put into the bank or that goes into your account has to be reported. So if you get a refund, you have an event, some kind of a fundraiser for the PAC or some kind of an event, and you happen to get a refund check from the people that you put a deposit with, that's a deposit. It's not a contribution, but it's a deposit. You have to file a deposit report because the money that goes into the account has to match the deposit report that you e-file with us. Okay? You need to go to the bank if you get physical checks. within 7 days of receipt. I don't know why you wouldn't, but it's in the statute that you need to go there within 7 days. I can't imagine why you would want to hold on to checks, but that's the rule. And if you get a check from a joint account, up in the top corner it says Mike Sullivan and Lynn Sullivan, and it's signed by Mike Sullivan. The old rule used to be that it was from Mike unless there was a note that said it was from Mike and Lynn. Well, the law changed. It basically said, if it's from Mike and Lynn and they're both pre-printed on the check, and Mike signed it, and you want to split it, you can. Okay, it's similar to the federal law. It just makes life a little bit easier for you and for us, I think.
But you don't have to.
You do not have to. And that's what a deposit report looks like once you do it. Okay? So, you'll see on the left-hand side the date of deposit. Then you'll see the name and the address of the contributor. Okay? And you see, we just put a couple of notes in there that $500, the limit hasn't changed. Many of you have read about the $1,000 limit. That's for individuals to candidates, that's it, that's the only change. Long discussions as we negotiated the statute about whether or not to change the PAC limit, okay, the $500 limit, and the aggregate limit of $7,500 and $18,750, okay? They decided not to change it. I didn't have any stake in that, I don't care. I don't care if the limit's $1 million. We're about administering the limit, it's not about what we think. But they decided to keep it at 500, so that's theirs, okay? If a group donates to your PAC, that group can't have corporate money. That's what's known as the 10-15 rule. I don't want to go too deep into that. That has nothing to do with the change in the law. And most of you probably already know that or know how to deal with it. Candidates can give money to a PAC, but they can't be the sole financier of your PAC. They can't have the majority of the money into your PAC. Cash is $50 still. Money orders have been increased to $100. So you have a fundraiser for your PAC somewhere and someone walks in with a $100 money order, that's great. A month later they walk in with $50 in cash, that's okay as well. That's it. Okay, why they didn't lift the cash limit, I don't know. $200, we get to that point, it's letter sent, info requested. If you don't have the occupation and employer, that's the threshold. If you don't have the occupation and employer, we're going to look for you to tell us that you've done something, which is the letter sent part. Okay, that's a pretty common thing with candidates, less so with PACs. And here's many of you are in the $50 and under category. You can probably deposit report that says various employees, $50 or under, there's the amount. Okay? And you might want to put, for example, September 1 payroll deduction. That triggers you to know what you're talking about with your records. Okay, any questions so far in the? Okay, we'll start in the back and then come forward.
Once you have somebody that goes over that $50 threshold,
They have to be itemized.
itemized.
Yep. Now you have to list them. So it's not my most favorite rule, believe me. Yeah. Well, as an aside, I'm a football official. I've been a football official for 30 years. I don't like all the rules I have to enforce there either. You know, so it's just part of the deal. Okay, there's one over here.
If you don't have any deposits, you have to file a report.
If you don't have any deposits, you don't have to do anything. Life is good. In the back, and then I'm coming down.
As a follow-up to this question, when someone goes over the $50 threshold,
Yep.
they've been in the unitemized receipts, if they're just giving $2, we're reporting Sam Smith $2.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hate to answer that because I live in the real world and I know how much of a pain that is.
Right.
But perhaps some of you who are getting the payrolls may be able to work with whatever the payroll department or HR is to get them to give you an Excel spreadsheet that you can then dump down into it. It makes your life a little bit easier, right, Al? They can usually do the import. So there are ways to hopefully make that a little bit easier as no one's sitting there typing that in.
So if we have no deposit activity, you don't have to file a report.
Right.
What about the bank?
The banks always file.
Always
The
twice.
banks always file, yeah. The banks don't file, we have
Even if
conversations
it's no
with them.
activity.
No activity. Yeah.
Still have to file a year-end report.
And you will have to, yeah, you'd have to file a year-end report. We'll
Yeah.
get to that in a minute. But in terms for that period, no deposits for that period, no report for that period. Question in the back.
Before you hit the $50 limit, are you still allowed to report employer and occupation if that's in your system already? I mean,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely. More is better. More disclosure is always better. Okay?
Is that date the date of the deposit?
That date is the date of deposit, right? Is that what we go with? Date of deposit, yeah. Okay. This is more for candidates. Let me just finish the slide and I'll get right back to you, okay? Business contributions are prohibited. Everybody pretty much knows the business rules, right? If you get a business check, okay, Call the contributor and say, thanks very much. I don't think I can take your business check unless you're a sole proprietor. Okay? LLCs, corporations, partnerships, anything like that, you can't take their check because it's a prohibited contribution unless they are a sole proprietor. If that happens, you call them up, just say, hey, I'm sorry I can't take your business check, I gotta send it back to you, can you send me a personal check? They probably won't like that, but that's the way it works. Okay, there was a question back here, sir.
Yeah, if you file your year-end report for 2014 and you have no activity in January, do you still have to file the D-102?
Yes, yes, we're gonna have you file the initial report, because
Even if there's no activity?
even if there's no activity, because we have to have the continuity of the time frame. Okay? Contributions prohibited, in-kind contributions. If your PAC is a business PAC-oriented PAC, and they are, and the corporation is providing the administrative services for the PAC should be reimbursing the corporation for those administrative services. There's no free lunch, in other words. No corporate money can be used to help the PAC. Okay. This is the meat, third-party bank verification. How does it all work? Okay? You are filing a report. The bank is filing a report. All we do, well, it sounds simple. I'm sure Al, when Al was building the system, and frankly, Al did build the system. This is not something that was done with an outside vendor. We take what the bank tells us and what you tell us and bring them together and make sure they're the same. In this case, and I did the seminar last night for some candidates, this is Charlie Baker's report for the second half of May. This is what the candidate filed. This is the unique identifying number that's assigned to each deposit report that you put in. Okay, you'll see on the bottom, and you've got it on your sheet, that he raised $175,965. The bank, on the other hand, showed us what came into their account. And the bank said, look, $175,965. That makes us very happy. The numbers match. That's why we want you to do the deposit reports within 3 days, so that they're fresh in your mind when you do them. It's not something you go back to after 4 months and say, oh, did that check clear? What, you know, that's when it all gets fuzzy. So if you do it within 3 days, it's done pretty quickly, the amounts match and we're happy. On the other hand, how many of you have gotten the dreaded letter from us at some point? I'll bet there's more than one person out there. You're just not raising your hands so you don't want to admit it. Okay? The dreaded letter is going to come if you file deposit reports that total $3,580, and the bank says, oh yeah, there's $7,480 in here. We're going to be like, well, okay, if the bank said you put in that much, and you don't match, we've got a problem. Okay, that's the third-party verification. Now, in the past, when you did a report, we had no idea how much money you really raised, right? It's what you told us. That's the self-reporting non-depository system. This is the third-party independent system where we actually really do know, and the public really does know, how much money went into your account. Yes, sir.
Well, obviously, you're going to be having on the closing date, there's probably going to be inconsistencies.
We were hoping, you know, the banking world's a little bit different than how we do our things, but we're hoping that you will make your deposits not near the end of a month, okay? Like, don't make it at 3 p.m. on January 31st, because it's going to flip into the next month. When that happens, by the way, because they're reporting basically every 2 weeks, we might wait a couple weeks before we do one of those letters. In fact, I know we will, because we're going to look to see if your next month's report might show that. And we solve our problem, and we don't have to bother you with that. So we've sort of taken that into account. That happens with candidates a lot. It's a very good question to ask. Okay? Okay, so that's the deposit side. It's really not that hard. You do the deposit reports, the bank tells us, we merge the two, and if everything looks good, we all move forward. The expenditure side is where I think your life gets easier, okay? You know what you can spend money on, enhance the principle for which the PAC was formed. I'm sure 80% of you out there are making contributions to candidates, okay? Now, and obviously no personal expenditures, but that's the you can't go to Disney rule, okay? Change in the statute. Used to be in the depository system, that you had to use these special checks. They were long, and they had boxes on them, and it was really kind of silly. Now you can use a regular check. Okay, as long as you put the information on, we'll show you a regular check in a minute just to show you how the bank pulls it off. But we also put in a change in the statute to allow the committee to use a debit card. Okay? When you use a debit card, though, you are going to have to add, go into your report, add information, amend the report. And because when you use a debit card, the bank has no idea what the purpose is. We'll sort of walk you through this, okay? So there's the convenience of using a debit card, which is somewhat negated by the fact that you might have to go in and do a little bit more on the expenditure side in terms of reporting, okay? Okay, there's a check, pretty basic, right? One thing we've asked everyone to do, we've had pretty good success, not perfect success, is put your ID number on your check. Why? When you make a contribution out to a candidate, we want them to put in your ID number in the report, and it also signifies to them, especially for the unions, that the money on that check is from a PAC, not from a general treasury. That is the single biggest problem we deal with, right, Mike and Caroline? Is the money from the PAC? Is it money from a union? We don't know. Okay. In this case, when you have your ID number that begins with 80, actually soon to be 81, right? Because I think we're getting near the end. Okay. That triggers everybody's knowledge, the candidate's knowledge, that the money is coming from a PAC. Okay. Other stuff is very simple. The date. I mean, it's just like writing a regular check. What's important? Well, down here in the memo portion where it says mailing list, that's the purpose. Okay? If you don't fill that out, we're going to ask you what you spent the money on. Okay? Now, generally speaking, we know it's a contribution. We'd still like you to write that down. We'd like you to put the candidate number as well. That makes it easy for us. And the ID numbers are easy to find on our drop-down list, so it's not difficult. Oh, you added that. Look at that. Huh? See, I haven't seen this before just now. So. Senator Vic Gatto? Where did you find that name?
I just have to come up with names all the time.
Does anyone here know who Vic Gatto is?
My uncle.
We were talking about Tufts.
He's my college football coach.
We were talking about Tufts when we did this that day. So I just thought
That's just weird. Okay. I'm a little thrown by that. That's almost where my fraternity house was too. Anyway, so it's a long time ago. That's pretty much what you do, write on a check. That's just weird, Jason. Okay, so the big idea, expenditures must flow through the depository account for complete disclosure. In other words, we don't want you doing reimbursements. We don't want you spending out of pocket. We want everything to flow through the system. That's why we petition the legislature to allow them to let you use debit cards. Because there are places where you might want to be, you have a fundraiser, or you're having a meeting of the PAC, and maybe you're doing a mailing of some sort, and you want to feed the people, you want to go out and get some pizza, and you get to the pizza shop and they don't want to take your check. You got a debit card. We're trying to keep you away from reimbursements. Because quite frankly, when we see reimbursements, that's when we know there's trouble somewhere along the line. It's sort of what we call the John Bonomo, Diane Wilkerson rule. Okay? All right. Kind of all know what I mean? All right. Reimbursements are bad. Okay? Everything flows through. So, what are the issues that come up? Make your purpose information detailed. Okay? Make sure that we know what you're writing. Top right-hand corner. The bank will thank you. Make your expenditure information legible. Somebody at the bank has to be able to read your check because they're going to key it in and do the filing. If they can't read your report, okay, I mean your check, and they write illegible under purpose of vendor, guess what we're going to do? Send you a letter asking you to amend your report. So take your time, make them legible if you're writing them out so that the bank can do it and you don't have to do any work later on. Reimbursements cannot exceed $100. We prefer that you not do reimbursements at all. And if you don't know whether you can spend money on something, give us a call. We'll be glad to walk you through. Now, having said that, understand that there's legality and reality in how you spend your money. And so much of what you spend might be legal, but in the real world of, newspaper stories and things like that, it might be a very good headline. So as you're writing that check or paying that bill, and you don't know whether or not you ought to pay it from that account, think about how it will look on the front page of a newspaper. Okay, that's what I tell candidates all the time. They generally get it. Okay, any questions about expenditures? Okay, we're going next. Okay. Before I get to the year-end report, have I been able to frame the basics so that everybody sort of understands it? Or am I missing a part that we need to go over? Or does nobody want to just jump out and ask?
I do have a question.
Yep.
Now that the expenditure details coming from the bank,
Mm-hmm.
in a situation, if you have a service that's doing robocalls for you,
Mm-hmm.
and you have an invoice that has multiple places where, multiple candidates that the robocalls are made for,
Mm-hmm.
I had been sending one check and detailing it in the old system report,
Mm-hmm. Then you can always go back in and amend that report to add that detail.
because if I
We'll
send one
probably
check
ask
to
you.
that company,
Yeah.
the bank's not gonna
The
know.
bank's not gonna know, you're right, you're right.
So you have to go in and amend.
Either you're gonna write very small on the check, or you're gonna go in and amend the report. I didn't say it was a perfect system, I said it was a better system. There's always gonna be a problem somewhere along the line, that's a legitimate question. But you're probably gonna have to go in and amend. You're gonna do a year-end report. It's gonna be very different than what you do now, okay? In the year-end report, in the contribution portion, all you're gonna do is put a number. Because you've already reported everybody throughout the whole year. It's just a summary number. It just says to us that the money you put into the bank is the only money you raised. There's no other money, there's no other bank account, there's nothing going on. It's sort of your certification. Same thing on expenditures. You don't have to list all the expenditures out again, you're just putting a number, okay? What happens in the year-end report that doesn't happen anywhere else in this system is the reporting of in-kind contributions and liabilities. You know when you do your regular reports now, the 3 in the year and the 2 in the off year, and you list your in-kinds and your liabilities? Well, the only time now in the depository system is at the end of the year, and they're itemized out. Okay, and you know that your report is due on January 20th, and that, frankly, it's going to be a little more strict in terms of the fines. We'd like you to get in there on time. I think we were somewhere in the 85 to 90% range. 85 to 90% range on time for the pre-election report this year, which is very good compared to where we've been in the past. Candidates actually were in the above 90 to 95% range, so people are filing on time. Okay. In-kind contributions is something that the PAC receives of value other than money, and it counts towards your $500 limit. If somebody gave you something that was other than money, lumber for signs that you might use or something like that, or they hosted a reception of some sort, it would count towards the limit. There are 2 exceptions. One is personal services that the members of the PAC might perform for the PAC, holding signs. How many of you are treasurers? Well, no, this is the wrong group to ask that question for. But in candidate situations, many treasurers are volunteers. They're providing a personal service is exempt from the in-kind contribution definition. And the second one, did we put a second one in there? No. Okay, we skipped the second one. Sub-vendor reports. Some of you are understanding of this, and some of you have never heard of it. What's a sub-vendor report? This has nothing to do with the depository system. This just has to do with the statute, and I'm going to take the opportunity to spend a minute or two on it. If you hire a vendor, and you pay that vendor more than $5,000 in a calendar year, and that vendor subsequently pays another vendor more than $500, then you have to file a sub-vendor report. So let me give you an example. This is more in candidate world, but I hire a consultant. I pay that consultant $40,000. That consultant subsequently takes some of that 40 grand and spends it on mailings, radio time, printing, things that run a campaign, okay? Under the old rules, all that had to be reported was the 40 grand to the consultant. So people were basically hiding how they ran their campaigns by saying, oh, pay the consultant 40 grand, that's the vendor. This is really what happens underneath. So if you pay somebody 5 grand or more, and then they spend 500 or more to a different vendor, then you have to file a sub-vendor report. They need to tell you that. Where do we see that a lot in candidate races? Media. They spend $1 million with a media buyer, and the media buyer has to say, okay, I spent so much with BZ, I spent so much with HDH, I did so much on radio. Is it kind of a pain? Yeah, but it gives great disclosure of where the money is really going. And frankly, the media buyers and some of the printer brokers, they hate this because guess what? Their cut is finally shown. So you're seeing that, oh, media buyers get somewhere between 11 and 15% for placing the ads. So there's a lot of money out there that is now being accounted for. So that's what happens with sub-vendor reports. So if you get into that world where you're using vendors and you're paying them a significant amount of money, you need to keep track of what you're doing. Summary of reports due. Deposit reports, we talked about that, right? That's one you're going to file within 3 days. If you don't put any money in the bank, you don't have to file a deposit report. Okay, it's only when you put the money in. Okay? Bank reports, that's what the bank files with us, right? They're gonna tell us how much money went in. You're gonna tell us who it came from. We merge. They're gonna tell us how much got spent. You may occasionally have to amend that report, especially if you use a debit card. Okay? Amending reports are not difficult. Year-end report, that's the summary report we talked about. We have to file in-kind contributions and liabilities as well, and any sub-vendor reports, okay, if you have activity. And those are supposed to be filed monthly by the 5th. These are issues from our audit department that, generally come up. File on time. Okay, we don't really want to send out those dreaded letters to you. Your life is easier if you file a complete report because we don't send you a letter. Our life is easier because we don't have to send you a letter and follow up on it. Some of you are really good about that in terms of all of the stuff that we do. There are some PACs that Mike and Caroline can attest to that never get a letter. And there are some PACs that get a letter every time a report comes in, okay, for whatever the reason might be. One of the other things you don't have to worry about anymore is beginning-ending balance issues. Does your beginning balance of this report equal the ending balance from the last report? That was kind of a pain for people, especially if they had made amendments. I see a couple smiles out there like, oh yeah, that's been a real pain. You don't have to worry about that anymore. The bank's taking care of the beginning and ending balance. On par, this is really a good move for everybody. It's going to be a pain in the butt to get into the system. Once we get in, this is going to work pretty well, I think. Make copies of any checks that your PAC receives. Just good business practice to do that. Keep all your invoices. If you have to send out letters to people asking about occupation and employer because we've sent you a nasty gram, please keep those letters. Because if we ever get to the point where you're not amending and you've got 50% of your contributors or $200 or more, but you've given us no information on occupation and employer, then the third letter or second letter that comes out is going to say, send us the letters that you sent out. Which is the point is to get you to send out the letters. Using a full name rather than acronyms and using a contributor's full name. Really basic stuff. Just so that we get good disclosure so we don't have to communicate back and forth and try to disclose a little bit better, a little more accurately. God, I hate doing this part of the seminar. Okay. This is a 45-minute seminar. I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. Okay. Public employees can't raise or spend money. Public employees can't be treasurers of PACs or political committees or party committees. So those of you who represent a public employee union and the named treasurer is a public employee, have that person resign immediately. Okay? Please. We get into these situations where public employees are raising money, the general consensus is the money's supposed to be purged because it's raised illegally. If you're not sure if your treasurer is a public employee, we can have a conversation about that. Okay? What's a public employee? They're appointed to a public position and they're compensated. Doesn't matter whether it's full-time, doesn't matter whether it's part-time, city, state, MBTA, MHFA, all those MITC, all those alphabet soup agencies. They're all public employees. If you think they're public, chances are they're public. So have that conversation either with us or within and make sure that any public employee is not the treasurer of the committee. Fact of the matter is we've had, 3 or 4 of those over the last year where we've had to say, look, you're really a public employee. You've got to get out of that system. And frankly, it's an easy story for the media to write. Anybody from the media here? Here's a little tip. Generally speaking, a lot of reporters are lazy. They wait for someone to give them a story and then they write it. Okay? And that's an easy one. That's an easy one. And what's the other one? Occupation employer is another easy story for them to write. So that's the part that you want to be careful about. I see a hand up? Yep.
What about special public employees? Somebody's appointed to a board or a commission, uncompensated.
Uncompensated is the key word. If they're not compensated, if you serve on the planning board in your hometown and you're not paid, okay, you're appointed by the mayor, but you're not paid, you're not a public employee. You must be appointed and compensated. However, it doesn't matter how much the compensation is. Okay, so for the crazy example I give is someone serves as a board of registrars, right, for elections, they get paid $500 a year. You know, their full-time job is a lawyer in Boston, they make 200 grand, they're still a public employee. Does it make sense? No. Remember I told you in the beginning I don't like all the rules I have to enforce? Okay, but this goes back to 1884, so it's not much I can do with it. Okay, so basically stay away from the money for public employees. Government buildings, you can't solicit or receive in a public building, so those of you in a union or in a PAC or wherever, when you go to the State House, please don't give a check to somebody. All right, go outside. Send it in the mail. Yeah. I know it's never happened in the history of government. All right? Please go outside. Make my life easy. Okay. Do not come to Ashburn Place. See that plaza out there between the two buildings? That works fine. All right? I don't know why it's not property, why it's buildings. Again, it was 1884, but just do me that one favor. Okay? Don't send the check in the mail. All right? That's just as bad as handing it to somebody, to a public address. Unless you're trying to set somebody up. Okay? In which case, good luck. Okay? That's pretty, and public resources, that's really not an issue for you folks. Basically, the bottom line on that is if the public paid for it, you can't use it to help your PAC or to help a campaign or anything like that. We actually see this in ballot question committees all the time, when they have a 2.5 override in a town. The superintendent sends something home in Johnny's backpack that says, you know, vote for the override, our children are our future. That's a bit of a problem. Yep.
Can we hold a vote in a public building?
Can you hold a vote? That's got nothing to do with the campaign finance law. I talked to Michelle on elections, but I would think the answer is yes. But we end up with the money end of the deal. Okay. What am I missing? Before we get into the website, any questions? Okay. Yeah.
If you already have a PAC in existence, do you have to file that 101 PC?
No.
In other words, you have a PAC and you have your e-filing.
No, we're not asking for new 101s right now. That's a statement of organization that you filed a long time ago.
Okay.
You don't have to file a new one.
That's all.
In the back.
Yeah, on deposits, the bank is reporting the total deposit or the detail?
They're not giving us the detail on who the contributors are.
We're giving you the detail.
You're giving us the detail.
It's the opposite on the expenditures.
It's the opposite on the expenditures, exactly. The bank is on deposits, the bank tells us how much, not who.
Total, right.
Yeah, okay. At the end of this, there may be questions that you don't want to ask in front of somebody else. So we're going to sort of set up what we call the confessional.
Yeah.
Okay? You can sort of talk to each one of us or whoever you want to talk to, or introduce yourself to the auditors that deal with your account, and we'll try to answer your questions so that, you know, if you don't want to ask in public, and there's a lot of people who don't want to do that for whatever reason. How many of you have been to our website? Any good?
It works. It works.
Yeah. I guess you're going to stay employed. Right, Sam? Good job. Listen, you paid for it, and it's a good website, and it's a treasure trove of information. Okay, you can find out pretty much anything you want about how the money flows in the state. But we're going to look at, for the example today, we're going to look at some depository reports. Marty Walsh is a good example. He's a candidate, but he's in the depository system because he ran for mayor in a city that's over 100,000. Now that threshold has now moved down to 75, but Marty had to go from non-depository to depository. Actually, you know what? Click on reports for him. Scroll down. Scroll all the way down. Keep going. All right, go to 2013. No, can we go any further? No? Let's see. Bank reports. Okay.
That's when his bank report started.
That's when his bank report started. So where's his 102 other?
Yeah, good.
Oh, you have to go on periodic? Okay.
Periodic, all right.
Periodic.
Okay. So what happened with Marty Walsh was he was in the non-depository system, just like you are. Okay. And he decided in, what was it, April? Yes. Okay. He decided in April that he was going to run for mayor. And he came in and we said, okay, Marty, you need to get into the depository system. And he's like, what the hell is that? Right? Which is what the response is from everybody who has to slide over. So we asked him to file a report, an initial report that said, hey, this is what I had, this is what I've got. So he filed one in the old system, in the old one. The date on it was 1/1 through 4/9, okay, of 13. And then we put him back in. Now go back into the regular reports. So that was his activity for the first 4 months. And then we put him, see, it was called an other report,
okay, which was just a little different because he was a candidate. We're gonna ask you to do an initial report. Now we put him back into bank reports, and the bank starts filing in April of 2013, and they filed twice a month, basically every 2 weeks since then. So here's his report for October, most recent report, right here. You can click on that. And obviously this is something you can all look at. This is not an internal document. Okay. This is what the bank files with us. Beginning balance, I don't know how many of you can read this, but I'll still try to walk through it. Beginning balance, $622,884. That's the bank's number. That's what they're telling us. If you look at this previous report, you're going to see that that was the ending balance. Okay? Receipts, 155. Expenditures, 6,100. Ending balance, 771. That's the shell. That's the thing that the newspapers love to look at. They don't like to get into the details too much. They like the shell because they want to know what happens. Okay? If we click on receipts, which is both up there and down on the side, this is what your report's going to look like when you do it, depending on how many items you have in there. The date, everything was deposited. It's alphabetical because the software does that automatically. Okay? The date that was deposited, the type of tender, okay, check, do we have wire on there?
Yes.
Okay, check, wire, money order, whatever it might be. Who gave the money? What their occupation and employer is. Does anybody raise money by credit card? Okay, you're going to have to put in a negative number to make it work, to make the numbers work. Because if someone gives you $500, you're not getting 500, but their contribution is 500. So you're going to have to put in a negative amount for what the fee is for the merchant provider. Okay? When you get to it, if you don't understand it, just give us a call, we'll walk you through it. When you get to the bottom of the page, don't look at this, it'll make you dizzy if you have vertigo.
Almost there.
Okay? You get to the bottom of the page, first line here says committee reported itemized receipts, 149,644. Committee reported unitemized, that's under 50, right? $5,300. How much of the committee report for the reporting period? $155,007. What did the bank tell us for the reporting period? Bank credited total, $155,007. Guess what? Marty did well. Okay? Of course, he's got someone doing this for him, obviously. He's not sitting at home at night. But it matches, no letter, unless he's missing a whole bunch of occupation and employer. But generally speaking, that's what we're looking for, right? Okay? Is make sure the numbers match. Make sure you disclose what went into the account. He's done a fairly good job of this, but we're going to show you some letters that he got as well. On the expenditure side, it's too bad we don't have a link on the bottom. Okay. That's what was on his checks. That's what the bank reported. The date it cleared, the vendor. Don't worry about addresses. We're not worried about addresses anymore. Okay, when you write out a check, we're not asking the bank to give us the address. There's no place for you to put it on the check. And frankly, 9 times out of 10, if somebody wants to look at this and try to figure out the address, they can go to Google and find it in about 3 seconds. Okay, so it's not a problem. The purpose, however, is important. If there's blanks in the purpose section, we're going to ask you to fill them in. See right here where the bank told us deposited check return? Remember I told you about early on about the person who gave you money and the check bounced and you didn't balance it out? Well, here the bank did it. They showed the deposited check and the $61 monthly service charge, which I guess, David, is why banks do so well. Come on, I had to take one shot.
Mike, a question, when going back to the reports and deposits, I mean, we get about 10% of our payments by credit card, but we don't see the actual fee for that until the end of the month in an aggregate.
Yeah.
So let's say we had $2,500 in deposits.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the month, we get a statement from the bank saying, merchant fee, and it's an aggregate.
Yeah, that's the negative number you're going to
That's
put
the
in.
negative. So we would put in, Michael Sullivan, $100 contribution, because that's what we received.
Actually, you probably didn't receive the 100, you probably got like 96.42.
$96.50. But
Right.
we're not going to know exactly what that amount is until the end of the month in the bank.
And we're going to look at that on the monthly spectrum. If it's off a little bit, we're going to know the next report's going to work out.
So, but we still have to go back and to each one.
No,
and
I think you
and
can-
not do a bank fee and say.
You can
as
do
an
one total bank
expenditure.
fee. You can do one total bank fee. You don't have to break it out report by report. I mean, contributor by contributor. Yeah.
bouncing off of his question, if you have a PayPal account that people can contribute to.
The bane of my existence,
When you
PayPal
log in,
accounts.
you can see what the fee that they took. So for example, say someone donates $200.
Yep.
And we deposit $197 because that's
Right.
minus a $3 flat rate
Mhm.
fee. Do you just put $3 PayPal fee and
Yep.
just as a plain
You put
expenditure?
Joe Smith, $200, PayPal fee, -$3 on your deposit report. That's the one time you show an expenditure. If we go back, yeah, that's it right up there.
Thank you.
Okay, it's really, I mean, that's an aggregate. We don't ask you to break out each individual person. It's an aggregate amount for the month, or for the reporting period. We were on the expenditures, you just see that, you know, the $6,100 came in, I'm sorry, went out. This code where it says other, forget it, it's going away. It's the vestiges of 1973 when the system was created. We're losing that column, right, Al? The other column, okay. So that's just something that's going the wayside. And that's pretty much how the system looks. Now, correspondence. The letters that you get from us, I don't know how many of you know this, but they're right there on the web. They're scanned and put up right away. So, has Marty Walsh ever gotten a letter from us? I wonder if he knows that. I'll probably see him, it'll be like, what the hell are you doing? These are just basic letters that come out. You've all seen something like this. But here, he must have had us, in July, he must have been off a little bit. So we asked him about missing deposit reports. Those are the ones when it didn't balance. It didn't say 155 and 155. There were numbers off. I'm sure he's amended it. The second issue was occupation and employer. The third issue was excess contributions from folks. Just basic stuff that you're going to see. And the last thing was sub-vendor reports, because he paid somebody $72,000 for fundraising. So did that person use sub-vendors? It's all pretty basic stuff. The concept here is that we try to get them out on a pretty timely basis. There are other things we're doing. I mean, the example I'll give you right now is our auditors are working on cleaning up the Boston mayoral audits from last year, because we do full-scale audits, and we're getting ready for the full-scale audits for the statewide candidates. So are there occasionally a time where we might miss a month and do 2 months at once? Yeah. Okay, so that happens. So obviously, we want you to get everything right the first time, but if you don't get a letter from us and you know you've got a mistake, it might be that we just haven't gotten to it yet. You know, people go on vacation or they do, you know, they do other things as well. Question, and then I'll come down.
So with those letters, if once it's amended, will that be straightened out, or will that just hang in there?
No, once it's amended, it's straightened out.
So will that come off of that website, or will
The letter stays.
will I reply to that letter?
If you reply in a written form,
Yep.
that's is scanned and goes up as well.
Okay.
Okay? And your amendment would show too.
Okay.
Okay?
Should I assume we're not going to get any more letters asking for a list of canceled checks in this system?
One more time.
You'll get it this year and that's it.
What was the question, David?
The question was, can we assume that we'll never get another letter asking for canceled checks?
I was the only one that got that?
I hated doing those letters.
We hated receiving them.
You hated getting them, but I gotta tell you what, they were extremely helpful in getting people reasonably close to where they should be, okay? I mean, how many, we asked earlier, how many of you amended reports? How many of you amended reports multiple times? Right? Guess what? That's all gone. Not gonna have to do that anymore, because we know what's cleared the account. And before, we didn't know that those checks had cleared the account. You may have written them, but, you know, they're still stuck in, they're either stuck in the lobbyist's pocket, or the union guy's pocket, or they're stuck in the jacket pocket of the person you gave it to, who finds it 6 months later and then calls and wants to know if it's okay to cash. I mean, I'm sure you've all had that happen. This all goes away. It all goes away. It's gonna stop the letters. I mean, it's just the chain of letters used to be, we write to the candidate, and we say, the PAC says they gave you money, you don't report it. And then the candidate says, well, I didn't cash their check. So then we go to the cancel check routine. Oh, we didn't find a canceled check, so now we go back to you and say, hey, you gotta amend your report. Poor Caroline and Mike, their heads are spinning. You know, which way do we amend the report? Does it have to go up, does it have to go down? And you're frustrated. So, getting into the system, not gonna be a piece of cake for many of you. Call the office, we'll walk you through it, we'll talk to the banks, we'll do everything we can to make it easier for you to get into the system. Once you're in it, I'm telling you, you're gonna like it. You really,
you know, it's the old, I'm from the government, I'm here to help line. The truth is, I think you're really gonna like it. Look at all the doubting Thomases out there. Because I feel like I'm trying to convince my children of something. It's gonna work. You're gonna like it. Is it gonna work?
I think so.
It works for statewide candidates. It works really well. I can't imagine why it won't work. Don't be afraid of something new. Questions?
I just have a quick question about the deposits. We have two bank accounts, one that we're writing the checks from, and one where we're keeping the rest of the money that's running higher interest. We transfer the money to the account as needed. Will this system take both accounts and
Oh
add them
boy,
together?
we need to have a conversation. Because you're gonna need to have one account that everything flows through, but you're allowed to have a savings account as well, okay? So we might need to have a conversation about that, okay, in terms of how to start. Well, I hadn't thought about that too much, because very few PACs have savings accounts, but it's not insurmountable, it's something we can figure out. So it really wasn't a quick question, because it's gonna take a while to figure out. Any other questions? Yeah.
Give me more than just the banks.
We can get a copy of that. We'll get you a copy. Okay.
So we should be able to use the existing accounts that we have at the banks as long as they sign this thing agreeing that they're gonna,
Yes.
and I'm with citizens, so
Yes.
there shouldn't be any issue.
Shouldn't be a problem. We're gonna tell the banks, the banks they're gonna bring you in, okay? And we're gonna communicate with them that they're not going to report to us until activity for February, okay? Because that's after the transition of January. So, because we have to like flip the switch and turn them on and allow them to do that. But it should work fine.
Yeah, and the existing checks, you said it should be
Existing
okay.
checks are fine. Just put your PAC number on them, please.
Yeah, it has it on it.
Mike, we've been alerting our banks regularly, and we'll do it again this week, you know, all of them, not just the 20 or so here, that it's there, and if they see someone in, that they should contact your office.
Yeah, David and I have had this conversation about working with the banks. You know, I think that there's a little bit of trepidation on their part too as people come in, and hopefully we'll be able to work through it. I mean, it's business for them that they don't want to turn down, especially at the local level where, you know, we're picking up somewhere, we have almost 300 organized PACs with us. We're assuming that some are going to drop out. There's quite a few that don't have much activity at all. We think they're probably going to shut down because they write one check a year. They don't think it's worth it. But on the flip side, we're picking up over 200 candidates in those 8 new cities. And you can imagine what I'm dealing with when I'm dealing, these are the 8 cities that we're picking up. Fall River, Brockton, New Bedford, Quincy, Lynn, Lawrence, Somerville, and Newton. So I'm sort of running the gamut in the types of folks that I'm dealing with. You know, I went to Lynn, which is where I'm originally from. Half the guys on the city council were kids I went to high school with. This is rocket science to a couple of them. You know, and then I went to Newton last night, and they understood it in a heartbeat. So it's very difficult in trying to teach toward the toward the middle on this and make sure everybody's up and running. So we'll have some difficulty in trying to get it all together. So from our perspective, 500 new accounts.
Just a quick question. I know the bank will answer for it. Are there going to be additional bank fees?
David, are there going to be additional bank fees?
I should have said, are there? Do you have an idea?
I don't know. You know, we look at these reports, and sometimes I see no fee, and sometimes I see a pretty substantial fee. And I think it's whatever you work out with your bank under their normal business practice. You know, if you're bringing in $200,000 a year or $1 million a year because you've got 4 accounts with that bank, especially in the case of some of the unions who might have their dues money, and you know, then they're probably not going to charge you. But if you've got 3 transactions a month, you know, and you're not hitting their minimum, whatever it might be, then they are probably going to charge you. But I don't profess to know anything about how the banking world works. I guess that's a future area of employment that I'm not going to go down. In the back.
Do the banking fees have to be paid out of the PAC account first?
Everything has to go through the account.
It does.
Yep. Someone else raised a hand? No?
Right.
So we won't get those letters from you about quarterlies anymore. There'll be one letter about the annual report, is that?
Quarterlies?
Uh,
Oh, you're talking about the 3 times a year,
Right.
pre-prep? No, they're done.
Those will be gone.
The only letter you're going to get from us in terms of filing a report will be the year-end letter. Yeah. And hopefully those will be the only letters you get if everything ties in the way it's supposed to. What am I missing?
One more round of the PAC checks this year, for 14, that's it.
So
Year-end
just put a
report.
damper on the end of it, okay? Mike can tell them that they're gonna do that.
This
Yes, we're
year-end
gonna ask you
report-
for your canceled checks one more time.
Year-end report is as is. This-
Year-end report is as is, right? The one that you filed pre-election. We did really well. I think we have, what, like 6 packs out still, and that's it for pre-election?
Three, I think.
3? And I think all of the packs have already been filed for pre-primary, which is really almost unheard of. So I'm sure that the year-end will go well. We'll do the initial transition report, and then we'll slide into February. Will there be bumps? Yes. Will we work with you on them? Yes. You have my word on that.
This overheads and memos are on your website?
Everything's on our website. Any memo you want to get to, if you go to legal, Jason's not the only one who does this. Legal main page, on the left-hand side, advisory opinion index, interpretive bulletin index, and memoranda index. Any of those memos are there, you can print them out. They'll walk you through all of that stuff. If you don't want, not sure how to do it, just call us. We'll be glad to walk you through. Greg, you had your hand raised? No? Okay. An hour and 5 minutes.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay, again, we'll do the confessional.
What about the new software?
New software is coming out in March, February. New software will be out in February. If you haven't signed the sheet, we'd appreciate it if you would. Otherwise, thank